We're really excited to talk through more cyber liability today. Isaac's really going to help us out with some additional knowledge. And Morgan, if you click over to the next slide for me, please. Yeah, so we've got Isaac from business development. Shane's our carrier partner lead here. So these gents have really been taking over our entire cyber liability distribution channel here and have been doing a tremendous job. So if you guys just want to pop in and say hey to everybody.
Hey everyone. Picture might look a little different. Hair definitely has grown out since then, but glad to see a lot of attendees here, and I'm excited to chat with you all about cyber.
Yeah, how's it going, everyone? I agree, my picture is outdated. That was me fresh out of college, so I might need to update that soon, but thank you all for attending. Happy to get started.
For what it's worth, Shane, I don't see many differences. So you look great.
A little bit of stress.
Oh, fantastic. We'll jump right in here. So if we'll go to the next one. Awesome. Thanks, Morgan. We already talked a little bit about how folks are calling in, and I just wanted to kick us off. I always enjoy starting these webinars that way. We've truly seen the shift, right? From a lot of companies, a lot of folks shift from the office into a home office, the shift from a traditional filing cabinet to storing everything in cloud storage. And as a result, we've seen businesses face new kinds of risks that evolve on a daily basis. And I think, we're all insurance folks here, and we know that it's good to plan for the unforeseen, for the undiscovered risk. But as we really dive into cyber, things evolve so rapidly and quickly that sometimes it's hard to plan for the unforeseen, which is why at Attune, we're so happy to be partnered with a company like Coalition that really utilizes technology to drive their underwriting and then back-end support processes. So without any more from me, I'm excited to hand it off here to Isaac, and he's really going to talk us through more about the evolving market, coverage, et cetera.
Thanks, Brennan. Appreciate it. We'll go next slide here. Awesome. So to talk a little bit about cyber, you guys hear those big names, and maybe some of the ones that we listed off in that poll, stuff like Home Depot, Target, Sony, Marriott, and the ones that we listed off are all, I would say, targets of choice, where hackers and bad actors out there are focused on large companies with, big valuable data sets in order to hold and potentially sell their data. But, with the increased use of technology across a lot of small businesses across the country, that pattern has actually shifted to, and I'll have you go ahead and go next slide for me, Morgan, there, to targets of opportunity. These are more, mom and pop shops. And today, cyber attacks have become more automated, and tactics like, ransomware and funds transfer fraud have made these small businesses attractive targets for hackers. Some common things that exposures that you might face as like a small business owner include like phishing attacks, ransomware, data breaches, social engineering. And I know some of these terms you might not be super familiar with. Happy to go into them a little bit more when we get to some of these coverages, but these threats can lead to severe financial and reputational damages, making their livelihood, the business owner's livelihood, at stake, and making cyber insurance an essential component for risk management for small businesses. So more often than not, these threat actors or bad actors or hackers, as people call them, are resourceful and try to capitalize their efforts on targets of opportunity. So these small businesses that require the least amount of effort to exploit, whether that be, poor security parameters, making sure that they're not, protecting their internet-facing assets. They don't have the proper training to deal with phishing or identify phishing attempts. This means that cyber criminals often orient their attacks towards these targets opportunities rather than large choices or large businesses. And unfortunately, for many businesses, regardless of their size or industry, their largest exposures are the exploitable loopholes or lack of controls that these cyber criminals can easily pick up on and just monetize. Not only is their technology and our technology getting smarter, the hackers targeting these small businesses generally try to do it on or around times that where they make the majority of their revenue. Think like a flower shop around Valentine's Day. And the sophistication of these bad actors is pretty crazy to think about. Where like if a business was subject to maybe a cyber extortion event or their files were locked down in ransomware, the bad actors even have their own support staff, 1-800 numbers that they can call to ensure that they are getting their money. Unfortunately, this is a trend that's always growing year over year. And with that in mind, I'm sure you want to hear this. You will hear this next phrase a lot when talking about cyber, and I'll have you go to the next slide. Thank you. I'm not a target of cyber attacks, and this is probably the most common thing that you'll hear. Who alone is going to go after a local, maybe medical practice or flower shop or contractor, and hone in their resources to target that person? Well, bad actors will. They don't care if you're a cancer prevention society or a nonprofit. If you have the opportunity for them to get access to your network or your files, they'll go in there and get them. I'm not a target of cyber attacks phrase that made sense 10 years ago. Every business has some form of a digital footprint, and as a result has risk associated. After the webinar, we'll share a really good PDF that will help you kind of overcome these common cyber objections. Definitely recommend giving it a look, and I'll have you go to the next slide for me. So this is a pretty interesting statistic. This was information from last year. We're waiting on our claims report from this year to have a more accurate number for you, but this is from last year's number. It's crazy to think about that 56% of businesses hit with a cyber attack had a 4+ days of disruption. That could go longer. Imagine yourself in that seat where you're subject to a cyber attack and you can't do business for 4, 7, 20 days. Would you recover? And how much would you potentially lose? This is the threat that a lot of small business owners face with cyber attacks, as well as, without having the proper controls in place or like a strong IT or support staff behind them. A lot of times these cyber attacks have a 50-50 chance on killing a small business. So it's a pretty scary market, but we're here to help out with that. I'll have you go ahead and go next slide for me. So through the Attune dashboard, you all have access to Coalition Cyber. It would be a monoline cyber policy. Depending on the state, we have both admitted and surplus licenses available, which is really exciting to where everybody can be able to potentially get coverage for a kind of a difficult market to place, but it doesn't have to be difficult. We make things pretty darn easy for you. I'll have you go next slide for me. So with our approach, whereas traditional assurance is, I would say, reactive and slow, we help you and your clients better understand, manage, and mitigate their cyber risks with an active insurance model before there's an incident. I'll have you go next slide. So we provide, I would say, value and not just a policy. It all starts with the quote for us and with our underwriting model, which I'll go into a little bit on this next slide. But throughout the life of the policy, we also provide helpful insights and discounts on security services through our security dashboard called Coalition Control. And this is free for policyholders. And then, in the event of a potential incident, we also have our in-house claims response team called Coalition Incident Response, which is available 24/7, 365 with about a 5-minute response time. I'll have another slide a little bit later talking about coalition response, but these are the things that they would get on top of the coalition policy, where we have very broad coverages, and I think some unique coverages that make us stand out in the market. I'll have you go on to our next slide here. We'll talk about our underwriting model a little bit because I think this is a really cool thing to show folks. So the way that we like to think about like a company's network is it's like a house, as you see here in the picture, where there could be potentially a lot of unlocked doors and unlatched windows. And those are the things that bad actors are going after. Our underwriting model is powered by an advanced technology, which allows us to better understand and accurately price the risks that are faced by small businesses. When getting a quote with Coalition through the Attune dashboard, you also get a thing called a cyber risk assessment, maybe referred to as a CRA. You might see that. Though in order to generate this document and do the best that we can to underwrite, we do need a business website or an email address of your client. And this cyber risk assessment serves three purposes for us, I would say. One, we scan using the public internet and dark web, touching tons of data points, 10,000 data points on each risk to get a strong understanding of what kind of exposures lie within each quote. We condense these findings down into a nice, neat report called a cyber risk assessment that we encourage you to share with your client, as it details, how likely they are to have a claim, where they sit on the spectrum of risk, what types of limits are purchased by peer organizations, as well as, we give our recommendations on any potential findings that we have. And we offer our services through our security support center, where folks can, even if they're not an active Coalition policyholder, they can still get help in identifying these exposures or understanding them and how to remediate them. And that's just kind of a show of good faith that we have to help people understand and manage their risk, even if they're not a Coalition policyholder. It's definitely a really good thing to take advantage of. The cyber risk assessment is doing a lot of the heavy lifting of our underwriting as well, with all those data points out there. The way that I like to think about cyber is that no two risks are the same. So we underwrite each risk differently depending on their tech stack, industry type, number of employees, number of record counts. An example I like to give is, say that there's two hospitals right across the street from each other in the same town. There could be totally different risks involved, depending, maybe one is using Google, maybe one is using Microsoft, maybe there's more employees at another and more record count at another. These are two very different risks, even though they're the same industry. So it's kind of interesting to think about that there's just a lot of variables to take into account, and we help you condense all those variables down and show you the money, right? Show you where the exposures lie. And then the last thing I'll talk about with this cyber risk assessment is that it can be used as a selling tool. Like I explained earlier, you're able to show your clients where they sit on the spectrum of risk, show them the average claim and the limits purchased, and it just helps you better align with your clients and provide them with all the information that they're up against. I'll have you go next slide for me. So probably a few questions out there about, what exactly does cyber cover? Again, we're a cyber monoline. It's not necessarily a bot product, but it can be easily obtained through the Coalition or the Attune dashboard with Coalition. And we make things, again, really easy on you. It takes about 3 to 4 minutes to get a quote. We'll show you what that looks like in a few minutes. But a quick overview of what cyber insurance covers. There's obviously quite a few more coverages than this, but I recommend just taking a minute and take a look at some of these and a brief little synopsis of what it looks like when a claim triggers and what would be covered. Additionally, I'll take some time to chat a little bit about some key coverage differentiators, like our pay on behalf of language. Our policy is among the only policies in the market that is pay on behalf of across every single coverage. So at a time when cash is especially precious, our policyholders never have to pay losses or claims expenses out of pocket. That's really big when it comes to, paying a ransomware claim with Bitcoin or any type of cryptocurrency. Really, really comes in handy, and they don't have to navigate that kind of tricky process in getting those things. So additionally, we offer full prior acts, which is an extended protection to incidents or breaches that occurred before the policy inception date, but weren't discovered until after the policy was in effect. So say that there was an exposure, or potentially somebody got into their network a few years ago and it never came up and it never showed up until, say, we come along and insure them, it would still be covered, which is a really, really good thing. Unsure of the number of exposures out there that businesses face where people are just sitting and lying in wait, but it is pretty commonplace where they're just sitting and lying in wait for maybe vendor partner to send an invoice that they can manipulate, or they're waiting for somebody with power to send out an email that they can grab onto and impersonators fish one of those folks. So they just sit around and wait until the right opportunity. I'll have you go next slide for me. Cool. I mentioned this earlier, but we do have an awesome tool that's available free for policyholders. It's a thing called Coalition Control. This is newly updated as well, and it looks pretty darn slick. It provides real-time insights into your client's cyber risk profile, helping them identify, the vulnerabilities and to take appropriate action. The dashboard also offers access to a suite of cybersecurity tools and partnerships. So Okta for MFA, which is something we use here at Coalition, an awesome MFA solution. TwinGate for VPN services, stuff like that can help your clients strengthen their defenses. And for being a Coalition policyholder, your clients would receive discounts on these services. A really cool thing about this dashboard and just the way that we approach cyber insurance is every single month we perform a new scan. So similar to the cyber risk assessment that we perform when doing the quote, we perform one of those scans again every single month that provides updates to your clients on vulnerabilities and if there's any new threats that popped up out there in the cyber landscape. So for example, like say there was a new Microsoft Exchange server vulnerability that your client was subject to. As a Coalition policyholder, we would not only notify them, but give them action items to remediate the risk, as well as offer our services through our security support center to act as a guiding hand through that process. The best thing about it is that it's free for everyone, but Coalition policyholders are given additional insights and tools in addition to their policy. I'll have you go next slide for me. Beyond all that other great stuff that we've talked about Coalition, we do have our incident response team, which is a zero retention service that your clients can call, chat, or email into with an inkling that anything is off. Somebody was able to log into their account yesterday from the office and now their password's locked. Give us a call. Let's get to work on determining if there's a claim at hand. And if there isn't, there's a zero retention service and it doesn't show up on loss runs. And in the event of a potential cyber attack, our incident response team is available 24/7. It provides expert assistance with best-in-class counsel. And our team of cybersecurity professionals will help manage the incident, mitigate the damages, and ensure your client's business is back up and running as soon as possible. A really interesting stat that I like sharing with this team is that in 2022, we had around 900 tickets for our incident response team. And of those near 900 tickets, only 200 of them actually resulted in a claim. So we got to tell 700 business stakeholders that, hey, you're okay. There's no problem at hand. And then in the case that there were the claims, they had a full team behind them to help them get back on their feet. So really, really cool team, and just a great selling point for Coalition that they don't have to navigate the challenges of a cyber incident alone. I'll have you go next slide for me. So while some insurance policy include additional cyber coverages at a lower cost, they typically offer smaller sublimits that won't necessarily provide enough coverage in the case of a claim. Here's just a few examples of how costly a potential click on a ransomware could be for your clients. An average ransom demand, this was in 2021, was against Coalition policyholder $1.2 million. I don't know of a lot of small businesses that can stomach that potential cost, but we help out there. The average loss for a Coalition policyholder in like the SMB space, so that's less than $1 million in revenue, it's about $149,000, and then 57% increased claims with less than 250 employees. And we've actually seen a rise in claims with professional services, especially in the SMB space over the course of 2022. We'll have a really cool cyber claims report hopefully coming out here shortly that I'd be happy to share with y'all. Kind of goes into the threat landscape that small businesses are facing. I'll have you go next slide for me. And I think we're at the point where I'll hand things back over to Brennan, and he'll run through what it looks like to get a Coalition quote through y'all's portal.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. Appreciate all the info there. And hey, I saw a couple questions come in. We'll leave plenty of time to flush all those out during our Q&A. Because hey, if you know anything about Attune, you know this quote demo is not going to take too long. So excited to jump in and share the portal with everyone here. All right. Great. So if I could get a thumbs up, maybe Isaac, can you see Bellows Bakery here? Wonderful. Fun fact, this is a good buddy of mine's bakery. Used to have him insured in my independent agent days, and he told me I always have permission to demo this one. So it's kind of our go-to here in Attune land. So if you're, all Attune users here, this account page should be extremely familiar to you. Now you can see I've run a plethora of quotes here for my good friend Benny. We'll jump right in. Now, as you can see, we have a bunch of products here that you can come in and quote. For this specific risk, we'll go ahead and look at the cyber liability. We'll go ahead and default a date here. Let's do 5/1. I always like to mention that this is a full prior acts policy. Just think that's a helpful thing to know. Now we've got an address keyed in here. We've accurately described the business. Most important, as Isaac mentioned earlier, I have entered the domain. I want to be really clear at this point. If you do not provide a domain, there is a 100% chance that this risk will get referred to be reviewed by an underwriter. Typically, what they're looking for here is either that we provide the domain or we explain that the only domain available would be like a Facebook page or an Instagram page, which we wouldn't want to screen. Right, so we'll go ahead and continue as admitted. Just a side note here. If for any reason an underwriter from Coalition or somebody internal here at Attune would tell you, hey, this risk is not a fit for admitted, but it is a fit for surplus, you can always jump back in and run through our surplus application. For this one, we'll go ahead and quote admitted, and we will run through this application. And if you're curious what I look like with my cyber beard, I just found out there's a video of it in the portal here. So that will be very fun. Anyway, so the application here kicks off, and they're pretty boilerplate questions that you should be used to on an application. In the last few years, as a company had a cyber incident resulting in a claim over 25 grand. For my friend Benny, the answer here is no. He also wasn't aware of any circumstances that would give rise to a claim or any kind of concern like a notice from Outlook or something like that. When I asked him the question, Benny, do you have encryption on your computers, the laptops, the desktops, your phone? We went back and forth a bit. A few of his messaging systems were encrypted. A lot of the hardware was not. So we answered the question sometimes, which is totally fine and not a knockout. And I typically see folks get stuck here on the SPI section. So we're asking here if the company would collect, process, store, transmit, or have access to payment card info, personally identifiable info, or protected health info. When I thought about my friend Benny at the bakery, they definitely have a lot of PCI exposure, probably not a ton of PII other than names, phone numbers, addresses. They probably don't have any PHI, which would be very different than your insurance agency. If you sell any life and health, you definitely have PHI records. I know everybody here in the room definitely has a lot of PII on their systems, along with some PCI. Now, for the PHI records for the bakery, we answered none. When I look at that, that's like how many client files you'd have. And then when we look over the annual volume of card transactions, I see a lot of folks want to itemize how much revenue they're collecting here. And what we're really asking is how many credit card swipes is your business transacting? As we continue through the application, we do have a question here about complaints around the content of the website, advertising materials, social media, or other publications. The bakery hasn't had any complaints. Know that this is a question specifically around multimedia content liability. So if we have pervasive issues in the past with multimedia content liability, that coverage may not be available to your insured, but that will not knock out the full application. Now, afterwards, on the multimedia content, we're also going to ask, does the company enforce or have procedures to pull down content if there's any infringement or violation of IP or privacy rights? For my friend Benny, frankly, when I asked him the question, the initial answer was no. And we talked through it briefly, and he quickly wrote up a plan that said, hey, if I would get any kind of complaint against IP, somebody's just complaining, why do you have my picture on your website? I don't like that. He wrote up a plan with his staff and his social media manager to just pull any content that would get complaints. And then finally, our last two application questions here: does the company back up their data at least weekly? For the bakery here, the answer was yes. And I think for a lot of your insureds, they're probably backing up in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through Microsoft services or Apple services or something else. And then finally, I think the most important one here when we think about the emergence of FTF, does the company require some kind of secondary means of validation to make sure fund transfers are authentic? And if Isaac and I own an insurance agency and I got a vendor bill for $32,000, am I gonna knock on the wall and say, hey Isaac, who's this vendor? Do you know what I'm talking about? I think for our small business owners, there is probably a plan in place. But if not, this is a great opportunity adding value to coach and say, hey, you should have that. And so as we go to the next part of the application in the portal, keep in mind for our more confusing topics here, we did include a few helpful tooltips, just like we do on the coverage page. So just note, if you get stuck, there's a video up top we can help you with. There's some tooltips hidden along the way. And of course, you can always use our wonderful support feature here as well. Now, as we move on to the next step here, what you'll see is this defaulted right now to our custom package. But if you get started here with our essential package, this is basic coverage that's typically within a cyber liability BOP endorsement. I'd say it's slightly broader, but this is going to be probably your best bet comparing a true BOP endorsement to a standalone policy. If you would choose to go with a broader level of coverage, which I would recommend, we only see a few items excluded from the coverage section, which are the bodily injury and property damage coverages, both first and third party. This does not include the pollution endorsement, which by and large for our small business clients makes some sense. And then finally, it doesn't include reputation repair. I typically include reputation repair simply because it's very low cost. And as small business owners, you all know how important your reputation is in your market. And for I think the $2 a year in premium there, I feel it's always worth it to add that value to the quote letter. So as I had mentioned, as we look through the coverage line items, you'll see helpful descriptions for each individual coverage. I'm really pleased that this is included in the portal. Know that a lot of our marketing content also includes helpful descriptions of the coverages that doesn't just have a definition, it also will come with an example. I've always found very helpful when dealing with insureds, the facts can tell, but the stories will actually help us sell. So seeing those real-time examples can really help get people over the fence on why they would need some additional coverage. Now, looking at Benny's Bakery here, I was going to recommend he take out a $1 million limit here on this policy. Great, we're looking at $604 a year. I'm looking at this retained limit and I'm thinking he'd probably rather see $5,000, which I can just slide right back down. Perfect. Look at that. That's some deductible math I'm okay with here. All right. So it's very important to ensure that you submit the quote here. And we will wait for that submission to come through. When this hits the other side of the Attune portal, we'll have the quote letter, and we'll also see, really typically it just takes a refresh or two of the screen. We'll also see that coalition risk assessment populate. All right, so if we go ahead and download the quote letter here in real time. Great. Can I get a quick thumbs up? Can everybody see the quote letter? Thanks. Awesome. All right. So, hey, just a side note, I think these are really nice looking quote letters. I think it's in a really nice format to present to your insured. It looks clean. It contains nice information about coalition, what they do, who they are, and that kind of thing is important. I especially appreciate the section here talking a little bit more about some bigger perils here for us. We're going to see one more PDF here, and then we're going to get to the good stuff here, which is our actual quote letter. We'll see premium here. We'll see the aggregate policy limit, and then we'll actually get down into the details of coverage line items, any applicable waiting periods, any limits that would fall below the requested limit, and then some additional coverages on the bottom. I've seen a few questions come in at times on who are coalition's different backers. Can we know that? That's all going to be presented on the quote letter here. I'm sure everyone in the room here is very familiar with Swiss Re. Great backer here. And then finally, as we come down, you'll see some conditions, just normal stuff you'd see on the quote letter. So helpful graphics at the top. I think very transparent information here regarding what limits are here, what would be subject to a retained limit, what would be subject to a wait period, and potentially what coverage has no retained limit. Now, drum roll, please. If we come back to the portal, the CRAs always load really well, but I always hold my breath here in a live demo. So that worked out very well. We'll go ahead, download the coalition risk assessment. We'll pop this thing open, and this is my favorite part. I typically tell people I'm training internally, I think this is where the magic happens, right? We go from, hey, you need this, to, oh, here's some data to show you exactly why you need this, compared to anybody else in your industry that we've seen so far. I also think it helps that it just looks really nice and professional. So as we come through here, there's going to be a kind of an outline, a section that tells us what's coming up. We'll have a nice graphic here about active protection, how it functions, how active response works, and how the monitoring service functions. And then finally, we get to the good part here. Look at this. So just to be clear, I've done this risk assessment 8 times. The first time it did not look very good. But my buddy Ben, he really appreciated the call to say like, hey, thanks for letting me use you for the demo. Also, we should probably fix a couple things with your email, how you're using Outlook, etc. And they've really cleaned up their security measures, and it shows. So they're well ahead of their peers within the industry. They're 0.6 times as likely to have a claim. Great info here. And then we can come down. It gets very detailed in a good way. We're able to show critical, high, medium, low risks. I feel it's in verbiage that people understand, right? Oh, that's a medium risk. That's a low risk. Okay, I can understand that. It's not so technical that it feels like you need to go hire an IT vendor. We'll give some additional details down here below. And I think the coolest thing Coalition does is there's links embedded here, and it gives advice on how you could go about fixing this. So they're not just saying, hey, you're exposed. They're saying, hey, you're exposed, and here's a great way to go about fixing it. So I'm obviously a big raving fan of the CRA. I think it's a great asset to help you sell things to your insured that we all know they need to have. So Coalition's done a tremendous job of enabling our agency force here at Attune to go sell this better now without having to be a true cybersecurity expert. Take one more quick look at the beautiful Attune portal. Hoping to see everybody go run a cyber quote right after this one today. I hope you have something on your desk you can go check out. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Would love to leave some time here where we can answer some questions, make sure we get caught up on any that we've missed so far. So yeah.
Yeah, I saw a question from Chris in the chat for coverage descriptions included on the screen are excellent. Is there a particular coverage that you're curious on, like a claim scenario? We happy to go over. If not, I can kind of think of one. You know, we talked about FTF, we talked about ransomware quite a bit. I would say beyond ransomware, FTF is the second highest claim that we see here at Coalition. And that's stuff like really common thing is, you know, vendor invoice manipulation. So maybe client of yours is working with a vendor that they purchase goods from time to time. And potentially these invoices are upwards of $20,000, $30,000. Bad actor could be sitting, lying in wait in an email account, waiting to see one of those invoices come through that they could potentially copy or change or you know, send over an email saying, hey, this isn't our bank account that you wire these funds to anymore. It's actually this one. And of course, like that's not necessarily the truth. They haven't changed their bank account information that they're sending their funds to. And as a result, they send money to the wrong person. That's a pretty common claim scenario for funds transfer fraud. And unfortunately, one that's hard to detect unless you're aware of it or have, you know, internal procedures to be able to double check that, make sure that, you know, it's the right bank account that sending money to. One really cool thing about Coalition with funds transfer fraud is we have about an 86% clawback rate. So not only do we go out there and, you know, begin to try to get the money back, we actively try to claw the money back from the bad actor's account and restoring it rather than just saying, oh, here's your claim and here's your money and see you later. It's more that, hey, we want to get your money back, which is really, really cool. We've seen clawbacks up to a couple millions of dollars at this point. Some really, really cool stuff. Any other questions? Anything else?
You know, I saw the answers come in here, which is great to see. Thanks for our friends from Coalition for being here. But could you just talk through again, pay on behalf of versus reimbursement?
Sure. Yeah, so pay on behalf of is a coverage that's included that is coincide with all of our coverages. Basically, you know, say that there's a bad actor out there that manages to get into somebody's system and lock it down and say, hey, you have to pay me 10 Bitcoin and I'll unlock your files for you. Rather than the business owner going out and having to go get the Bitcoin and open up an account and make the transfer happen, we take care of that for you. And then it's reimbursed. So they don't have to worry about, you know, paying that Bitcoin or anything like that. But even before we do that pay on behalf of scenario, we'll try to recover your files for you as well. It's not like we're going to throw up our hands and just say, oh, here it is, here's your claim. We'll actively try to get them out of your system and restore the business to where there isn't a claim at hand. Really interesting statistic that was shared with me recently was that with the use of our Coalition incident response, about 45% of the incidents that come through that team are at no cost to the insured. So even if there's an incident, no cost, which is a really, really helpful thing for small businesses to thrive. I'll include a small little piece here at the end. So as a part of my relationship with Attune here, I help them out with a lot of different quotes. I'm here to assist with, you know, any type of questions or escalations on your guys's end. I'm CC'd on every single quote that's generated through the Attune portal with Coalition. So have visibility with everyone. If you guys have questions or need some help, feel free to reach out. I'm on those emails. We also have our Attune customer care staff that is awesome, and we'll be happy to help you as well. But if you have an escalation or anything like that, here to help with that.
Yeah, Isaac, I think we have a few questions coming in the Q&A section as well.
Oh, there we go. Let's see. Excess or umbrella. We do offer excess with another carrier. We work with a lot of other carriers out there for excess. Really cool thing is that we not only are focused on SMB with Attune, but we also are able to write 1 to 5 billion space up to 10 million limits, depending on their security posture. But excess is totally a play with Coalition. Talk about customers do it. Because who do it yourself ITA find the biggest hurdle. They don't have 90 guys, so they free. Yeah, that makes sense. Customers that have like do it yourself IT, or maybe it's like their cousin that helps them out. I feel like I'm that guy with my sister's business, where she'll just call me and ask me questions. One of the benefits I would say is that we have our security support center to help guide those folks through some of those difficult things, as well as lots of resources that are sent out through Coalition Control, just to help. We won't be like a full IT team replacement, but we'll definitely be a guiding hand in that process, as well as we have multiple partnerships that can help those small business owners out. Even if it's do it yourself, I feel like a lot of the things are as easy as like updating your firewall, or making sure that you have SPF enabled and stuff like that. What's the max limit available for funds transfer fraud? I know that the default sublimit for funds transfer fraud is 250,000. I believe we can take that up much higher through an endorsement, but that's at the underwriter's discretion. So an example like that, where you're requesting higher sublimit for funds transfer fraud, let me know. That's what I do, is I get to work with the underwriters and help you get that coverage.
I think we have a few more coming in the chat right now as well. So Dawn just asked that since every other line of business has a bad taste for Florida, is Coalition affected by geography of risk?
No, we have for Coalition, we're admitted in 49 states, I believe, everything except Wyoming. And then we have lots of surplus licenses out there as well. So geography isn't a problem. The biggest thing is making sure that it's a US based company is the big thing. We don't really deal with a lot of international companies, so it has to be US based.
I'll tag in there as well that so depending on surplus, it depends on Attune's filing as well. So if you have a certain risk in a certain state, feel free to reach out to either the customer care team through the live support channel or your account manager. We can get that answered for you, and we can let you know if it's worth your time to quote in surplus, or if we're even able to do it. We don't want you spending valuable time.
For sure. How does BI and PD liability come into play here? So that's bodily injury and property damage. A really interesting thing that I was working with an agent out in California that was trying to write a dairy farm, which was a really, really cool kind of thing for cyber insurance. And a lot of that is done with machines. So they, milk the cows and distribute the milk and get it all taken care of. And that's all done through machines. So something like property damage, for instance, is like, say they suffer a cyber incident and it's all linked to a computer network, and that network goes down, and once they get back up and running, their machines aren't working correctly or something like that, that would be covered underneath property damage as a result of a cyber incident where their machines weren't able to milk the cows and unfortunately able to get their business fully up and running. So that's an interesting one. Bodily injury. Another thing is like, I like to think of manufacturing, again, like an assembly line kind of thing where, a cyber incident goes wrong, or somebody has control of the systems and maybe the belts are flying and machine stuff is flying off the line, or something isn't working properly, something's running too hot, and somebody burns themselves, it would be covered under bodily injury. Yeah, and Xavier's in here from Coalition talking about same exact thing. Manufacturing is a really, really easy point to bodily injury and property damage.
Great question so far. And we can hang out for a few more minutes just in case any last ones come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of want to thank everyone for coming in, spending the time, being so engaged. A lot of great questions. I think we might have just gotten one more.
Carriers. No, offering cyber only require the answers to about 5 or 6 questions to offer a quote. Please provide. Yeah, I mean, that's similar to us. Is we have about 8, sometimes 9 questions. A lot of them are very, very straightforward through the Attune portal. With y'all, getting a quote's about 3 to 4 minutes, I would say.